Good morning students. Today we are going to discuss the maxillary artery. Now for description, you know it that maxillary artery is a branch coming from the external carotid artery. So the another terminal branch of the external carotid artery is the superficial temporal artery. Now this maxillary artery is running behind the neck of the mandible, running into the infratemporal region. Then it is passing on the superficial surface of the lateral pterygoid. After that, it passes between the two heads of the lateral pterygoid and enter into pterygopalatine fossa. Now this is the course of maxillary artery. Now for description purpose, we divide the artery into three parts. That is the first part from its origin to the lower border of lateral pterygoid. That is the first part. The part which is running in relation to the lateral pterygoid, that is the second part. Then is the part which is lying between the two heads of the lateral pterygoid, that part is the third part, and from that the artery passes to the pterygomaxillary fissure and enter into pterygopalatine fossa. Now coming to the next important thing, that is the branches coming from the maxillary artery. Now from this first part, the five branches are arising: deep auricular, anterior tympanic, middle meningeal, accessory meningeal and inferior alveolar artery. Now this deep auricular artery is going to supply the external acoustic meatus, tympanic membrane and the TM joint. Then this anterior tympanic is going to supply the medial surface of tympanic membrane. This middle meningeal artery is passing through the loop which is formed by the auriculotemporal nerve and enter into the cranium through foramen spinosum. Now within the cranium, this middle meningeal artery, as it is the largest branch arising from the maxillary artery, this middle meningeal artery, it divides into frontal and parietal trunks. The frontal part of the artery is lying behind the bony landmark, that is pterion, and the parietal part is running just backward, running on the surface of squamous part of temporal bone and parietal bones. And these branches, that is frontal and parietal branches, they supply the bone on which these branches they ramify. And in addition to that, they also supply the middle ear and structure related to the middle ear, that is facial nerve, tensor tympani, auditory tube. And what is important regarding another supply which is done by this artery is to the trigeminal ganglion. So these are the parts which are supplied by that. I repeat, that is meningeal artery. It is going to supply the different bones on which it ramifies. Then it supplies the middle ear. Then it supplies the trigeminal ganglion. Then the important structure related with the middle ear is that it supplies the facial nerve, it supplies the tensor tympani, it supplies the auditory tube. Now next is the accessory meningeal artery. Now this accessory meningeal artery is passing through the foramen ovale and enters into the cranium. The other structure passing through the foramen ovale is mandibular nerve, then lesser petrosal nerve and emissary veins. So again, as the name is indicating, so it is going to supply the meninges. The next branch from the first part is the inferior alveolar artery. Now this inferior alveolar artery, it just passes through the mandibular foramen and run into a canal, that is the mandibular canal. That is the mandibular canal, which is basically a canal present between the mandibular foramen and the mental foramen. Now, but before entering into this mandibular foramen, this inferior alveolar artery, it gives one branch, that is the lingual branch, and another branch is the mylohyoid branch. So to the mylohyoid muscle and to the tongue. So these are the branches given by inferior alveolar artery. So once it is entering into the canal, it gives branches to the lower teeth. So these are the small branches which are given to the lower teeth. And from this, the another end, that is from the mental foramen, it comes out and supplies this chin portion. So this is the fate of inferior alveolar artery. Now coming to the second part. So this is the second part. So this second part is running in relation to the lateral pterygoid, and most of the muscular branches are arising from this. That is anterior and posterior deep temporal arteries, then pterygoid arteries which are going to supply medial and lateral pterygoid muscle, then mesenteric artery, which is going to supply the masseter muscle, and then there is a buccal artery which is just passing through the surface of the buccinator muscle. Now next branch is after that this artery is entering into the two heads of the lateral pterygoid. So once it is entering into that, it gives branch that is posterior superior alveolar artery. So this posterior superior alveolar artery is going to supply the posterior teeth, that is of the upper jaw. Then after that, it is another branch is arising from this, and that is just the artery of pterygoid canal, which is passing through the pterygoid canal, and then is the pharyngeal artery, which is passing through the palato-vaginal canal and is going to supply the pharynx portion. And this is the branch which is arising from this, that is the greater palatine artery, which is running through the greater palatine foramen coming on the surface of the palate. So this is the palate. So it is going to supply the palate portion. So this is the hard palate. Now after that, one branch is entering through the sphenopalatine foramen and going to give, that artery is given the name sphenopalatine artery. And this sphenopalatine artery, it further divides into medial and lateral nasal branches, which are going to supply the lateral and medial wall of the nasal cavity. Now another branch, that is once it is entering into the pterygoid, this portion is lying in that region, that is a part which is lying between the two heads of lateral pterygoid and the pterygopalatine fossa. Now from that, this artery, it leaves the pterygopalatine fossa through the inferior orbital fissure. So this is the inferior orbital fissure. Through this inferior orbital fissure, it enters into the orbit. Now the name of the artery, it changes from maxillary artery to infraorbital artery. Now we call it as infraorbital artery. So infraorbital artery, in another way you can say, it is a continuation or the it is a continuation of the terminal portion of the maxillary artery. So now within the orbit, this artery is given the name infraorbital artery. Within the orbit, it gives the orbital branches to the orbit portion, and it gives the anterior superior alveolar arteries. Now this anterior superior alveolar artery is going to supply the front teeth of upper jaw. So these are posterior superior alveolar artery was arising in the pterygopalatine region. So anterior superior alveolar artery, they are arising from the orbit, within the orbit, from infraorbital artery. Now after that, this infraorbital artery, once it is giving branches to the orbital portion, so it is leaving that through the infraorbital foramen on the face and give branches to the face. So this is important. So this is all about the branches arising from the maxillary artery. So you should know the different parts, that is what is important for you is the different parts of the maxillary artery, and you just name the branches. So each branch is carrying its contribution to the part. So whatever be the part is there, accordingly the name is given. Suppose greater palatine artery and lesser palatine artery, they are going to supply the hard palate. Same is, that is orbital branches are going to the orbit. Then these are the muscular branches going to the different muscles of mastication. Then buccal is in relation to the buccinator. So the name itself indicates that which portion of you can say of this region in the course of maxillary artery is going to be supplied by this artery. So this is all about maxillary artery. So again I repeat, if you like my channel, kindly subscribe it, share it and like it. Thank you very much.